Good evening and welcome to BATV News. I'm Andrew Laidley. Economic Program Oversight Committee EPOC co-chair Keith Duncan admitted today that the recent economic growth numbers announced by the Planning Institute of Jamaica PAOJ are disappointing. He says the country needs to hit the IMF program's target of at least 2% growth, but that won't happen until greater emphasis is placed on value-added industries. Mr. Duncan was speaking at an EPOC press briefing this morning. More in this report.
Economic growth. This is an area that continues to disappoint us all.
But things don't have to continue that way. The EPOC co-chair says if the government focuses on maximizing value-added areas, Jamaica will start to see stronger growth.
Where we really need to see Jamaica put the focus around is in value-added industries. We see the robustness of the economy in terms of consumption, taxes. So we see people are consuming because we see it in the underlying numbers. What we need to see is more value-added activity, and this speaks to agriculture and speaks to tourism linkages. So we need to really focus around our value-added industry. We need to increase productivity such that we can really get that value added to really move our growth needle.
He says economic growth numbers can rise above the IMF's program target of 2%, but in order to do that, there must be adequate funding.
Jamaica has been in this range of, our 1% growth range, half a point to 1.5% growth range over the years, right? If we were to significantly increase value added in those industries, mining, agriculture, and technology, increase our productivity, we could see us moving out of that range and moving into well within above the program targets if we were to get the investments to fund it.
The EPOC co-chair argues that the initiatives which have been brought on stream to improve the island's value-added products must be carefully monitored.
So we really need to see the agri-parks working. We really need to see that irrigation becomes a strategy of the government that is executed such that we can get the water to our farmers in order to ensure them that they can grow over a period of time and we're not impacted by the weather-related shocks.
For BATV News, I'm Andrew Laidley. Meanwhile, Jamaica hasn't failed a single IMF test since the country signed on to the precautionary standby arrangement in 2016. It's an indication that the island has met all the structural benchmark requirements of the IMF. However, EPOC co-chair Keith Duncan made the point today that the program will soon come to an end and there's still a long way to go in some areas, particularly where GDP growth is concerned. Here's more. Keith Duncan says Jamaica's economy has remained hampered for too long. He says despite efforts to revive it, the numbers aren't adding up and time is running out.
This program actually ends in 21 months, approximately 21 months, December 2019, the precautionary standby arrangement under the International Monetary Fund. So we're well underway in this program. What we want to do is really move out of this program target range of 2%. We want to really move it into the 2 to 5% range. The aspirational target is at 5%, right? We want to see us beyond the 2% range growth. We want to move out of this range that we have been in for the last 30 to 40 years.
Mr. Duncan says while the country is doing well in the primary surplus and tax collection benchmarks, other areas are lagging behind.
What are the targets at the end of this program? A growing economy with a program target of a minimum of 2.3% growth in GDP. A debt to GDP ratio of 94%. Maintain a primary surplus ratio as at this point in time of 7%. Greater levels of international reserves. Target to be in December 2019, $3.75 billion for net international reserves and $3 billion for non-borrowed reserves.
So where are we now in relation to hitting those targets?
The primary surplus or the primary balance of the central government, which was targeted under the program to be at $59 billion, is at $96.5 billion. Tax revenues, which were programmed to be at $328 billion, are actually at $353.1 billion. Non-borrowed reserves targeted to be at 1.781 billion US dollars, are at 2.534 billion dollars. Apologies. And inflation targeted to be within the program range of 1.5 to 8.5% came in at 5.2% as at the end of December.
BATV News, I'm Andrew Laidley. Jamaica's trade deficit for January to December 2017 stood at over 4.5 billion US dollars. This is an increase of 23.1% when compared to the over 3.6 billion US dollars recorded for the same period in 2016. The information is contained in the latest International Merchandise Trade Bulletin released by the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, Statin. Here's Javon Keys with a breakdown.
The Statin figures show that Jamaica spent over US $5.8 billion on imports in 2017. That's a 20% jump from the US $4.8 billion spent in 2016. On the other hand, revenue from total exports increased by 10.2%, moving from US $1.18 billion in 2016 to US $1.3 billion in 2017. Most of Jamaica's imports during 2017 came from the United States of America, which is Jamaica's main trading partner. The island spent US $2.4 billion on goods from the USA. This is 2.9% above the US $1.87 billion recorded in 2016. Earnings from total exports to the USA was US $536.7 million, 10% above the US $487.9 million recorded in January to December 2016. This meant that the trade deficit with the USA for January to December 2017 was almost US $1.9 billion, a $500 million more than the almost $1.4 billion US dollars over the similar period in 2016. Mineral fuels, machinery, manufactured goods, chemicals, and miscellaneous manufactured articles were the main commodity groups responsible for the increase in spending. Jamaica spent US $1.4 billion importing goods from the mineral fuels category, an increase of 48.6%. This increase was due primarily to higher prices of crude oil and bunker C-grade fuel oil, gasoline, kerosene-type jet fuel, propane, and butane. Imports of machinery and transport equipment amounted to US $1.4 billion. This was higher than the US $1.2 billion recorded for the similar 2016 period, due mainly to the higher importation of road vehicles, general industry machinery, and equipment. Similarly, imports of manufactured goods were valued at US $673.9 million, 15.2% more than the US $585.1 million recorded in the similar 2016 period. Chemicals imported during 2017 were valued at US $664.8 million. When compared to the similar 2016 period, this was an increase of 19.1%. Manufactured articles increased by US $73.2 million to value US $520.1 million when compared to the $446.8 million recorded in 2016. This increase was due primarily to the higher importation of printed materials and articles of gold jewelry. Meanwhile, earnings from traditional domestic exports for the January to December 2017 period were valued at US $686 million, or 9.6% above the US $626.1 million recorded for the similar 2016 period. The commodity groups mining and quarrying and manufacturing were responsible for the overall increase. On the other hand, there was a 19.2% increase in non-traditional domestic exports, which moved from US $464.7 million in 2016 to US $554.1 million in 2017. In the meantime, Jamaica's trade deficit with CARICOM declined by 11.6%. The deficit stood at US $349 million at the end of the January to December 2017 period, compared to US $394.8 million recorded for the similar 2016 period. Jamaica's expenditure on imports from CARICOM was $427.5 million, a decline of 11.8% when compared to the US $484.6 million recorded for the January to December 2016 period. Total exports to CARICOM were valued at US $78.5 million, 12.5% below the US $89.8 million recorded for the similar 2016 period, while re-exports fell by 54.7% to value US $9.7 million. Domestic exports, however, rose by 0.6% to US $68.9 million when compared to the US $68.5 million for the similar 2016 period. The major commodity groups responsible for the increase were food and beverages and tobacco.
Still to come, OUR gives NWC the green light for multiple billing. We'll explain after the break. Welcome back. The Office of Utilities Regulation, OUR, has given permission to the National Water Commission, NWC, to issue multiple bills in a single billing cycle, but only under exceptional circumstances. The OUR says these special instances relate to reconnections, replacement of customer meters, requests by customer for readings, and any other circumstances approved by the regulatory body. NWC customers should otherwise not receive more than one bill per billing cycle. This new directive becomes effective on Monday. The OUR's recent decision follows a directive it issued to the NWC on March 31 last year, which instructed the NWC to cease and desist from dispatching multiple bills in a billing cycle and instead issue a single. The OUR instructed the NWC then that where readings are obtained subsequent to an estimated bill being generated and dispatched, any adjustment is to be applied to the account in the next billing cycle. However, in response, the NWC indicated that such a limitation would negatively impact the handling of ad hoc billing after routine activities such as reconnections, meter changeouts, and when customers make requests for reading. The OUR says based on this feedback, it has modified its 2017 directive to allow for the exceptional circumstances indicated by the NWC. In the meantime, the OUR says customers who receive multiple bills in one billing cycle in instances outside of what has been stipulated should contact its Consumer Affairs Unit immediately. The Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica, PCJ, has approved the offer from United Oil and Gas PLC to farm in on the license granted by Tullow Oil for exploration in Jamaica's offshore. Under the agreement between Tullow and United Oil and Gas, the exploration risk will be shared as the company will take up a 20% stake in Tullow's operations and obligations under its production sharing agreement with the PCJ. Meanwhile, the PCJ notes that all other terms and conditions of the production sharing agreement remain unchanged. Tullow will continue to drive its exploration program, but will now have another explorer to share the exploration risks. Keeping to its work plan, the company will begin a 3D seismic survey later this month. The survey, which is the most detailed research ever to be conducted in Jamaica's offshore, will last for about 8 weeks. The results of the 3D survey could heavily influence any eventual decisions to drill an exploratory well. In the meantime, the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica says the presence of any additional explorer in Jamaica's exploration acreage should send another positive signal to the international markets as the island tries to interest other companies in its open blocks. Victoria Mutual Investments Limited is reporting an increase in profits for the financial year ending December 31, 2017. The company released its report yesterday. More in this report. Victoria Mutual Investments Group says profit before tax for the 2017 financial year was more than $467 million, an increase of $74 million over the previous year. Net profits after tax was more than $346 million, an increase of over $29 million over the previous year's $317. Group revenue for 2017 was more than $966 million, up from over $155 million over 2016's more than $810 million. This 19.2% growth in revenue was driven by net fees and commissions, which jumped 78.9% to over $500 million. The company says the spike in net fees and commissions was due to its success in meeting the funding needs of the local and regional productive sector through its capital markets unit. Meanwhile, Victoria Mutual Investments Group's efficiency ratio was 51.59% for 2017, compared to 51.44% for the previous year. The company attributes the decrease to a 19.56% increase in operating expenses as it invested in human resources to meet the business's changing needs. Total assets increased year over year by more than $3 billion to over $20 billion as at December 31, 2017. This was primarily attributable to funds received from or on behalf of clients. In the meantime, Victoria Mutual Investments Group says the strength of its capital base is evident, with total shareholders' equity standing at more than $2 billion as at December 31, 2017. That's almost $1 billion more than the over $1 billion recorded at the end of 2016. The company says the growth in total equity is mainly attributable to net proceeds of over $683 million raised from the successful initial public offering, the net increase of over $146 million in retained earnings, and the 236.3% increase in the investment revaluation reserve over last year. For BATV News, I'm Andrew Laidley. Jamaica's Vision 2030 requires all of our efforts, and just like the National Vision, Executive Chairman and CEO of Derrimont Trading Company Limited, Derek Cotterell, says his company has a clear-cut vision which will ensure its longevity. Javon Keys has more.
Vision 2030 is Jamaica's long-term strategic plan to make the island the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. It's the vision that's guiding Derrimont Trading Company's executive chairman and CEO Derek Cotterell, who says if we all don't buy into it, it cannot be achieved.
We have to begin to believe. If we're going to change Jamaica, and even notice how I put it, if we are going to change Jamaica, then we have to begin to look at the vision and believe the vision. Because this is not just the government, whilst they have an important role to play. It's not just the government that's going to change Jamaica. It is us that will have to transform Jamaica into that vision.
Mr. Cotterell says, just like the national vision, Derrimont Trading has also set a goal to become a major company with world-class performance standards, while demonstrating the highest level of integrity in all business practices.
We have set this aspirational goal, and that's what we're working towards. So we have set the structures in place and continue to assess the structures to ensure that we can perform at world-class standards. So we are constantly assessing what these world-class standards are and benchmark ourselves against them.
He points out that in order to ensure that the company achieves its goals, there has to be a focus on its most important asset, its employees.
We have to make sure we had people who could ensure that the products were of world-class standard. We have to make sure that we had people who could develop new flavors. We have to make sure that the company could perform at world-class standards. And I can tell you that Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, in many respects, certainly when it comes to the output, the quality of the product, is performing at world-class standards.
The company says it is investing heavily in training its staff so they'll be ready to take on the challenges that will come with moving the business forward.
We are constantly training, and training is not a catchword in our organization. It is, in fact, all the managers in our organization go through 26 mandatory training for the year. 26 mandatory sessions for the year. And the emphasis for 2017 is the renewing of the mind. Sorry, 2018.
For BATV News, I'm Javon Keys.
Stay with us. Regional and international stories are next. Welcome back. It's time for regional and international news. Banks in Guyana are concerned about more and more customers being robbed shortly after conducting transactions. Here's more.
The Guyana Association of Bankers released a statement yesterday expressing concern over the rising trend of persons being targeted after conducting transactions at local commercial banks. The association said, "We strongly condemn these incidents and wish to assure our customers and the public at large that as an industry we are working with the relevant authorities and internally with all member banks with a view to arresting this trend." The association claims that it is cooperating with law enforcement to identify factors that allow this environment to flourish. The organization also offers consumers advice as to avoid becoming possible victims, saying, "We take this opportunity to encourage customers and members of the public to as far as possible refrain from conducting large cash transactions and instead utilize other secure methods of payment such as manager's check or direct payments. At this time, local security escort services should also be considered for persons operating businesses which may require transportation of significant sums." Reporting for Channel 2 Headline News, I am Bibi Bacchus.
Venezuela's government and opposition parties have agreed to postpone presidential elections by a month. Al Jazeera's Teresa Bow reports.
Venezuela is expected to elect a new president this year, but the date of when the elections are expected to take place has been changed once again. Earlier this year, the government announced they would happen on April 22nd, but now they're expected to happen in May.
It is established in the agreement for the election to be in the second half of the next month, May of 2018. There is no other alternative. The only option is an election.
Critics accuse the authorities of shifting the vote forward to wrong-foot the opposition in a bid to improve President Nicolás Maduro's re-election chances. The leading opposition coalition is boycotting the poll, describing it as a farce to legitimize a dictatorship. However, one presidential hopeful, Henry Falcón, has already launched his candidacy.
That's the government that we want for Venezuela, a government of national unity that includes and doesn't exclude, a government that can save us from this misery, from this tragedy, this debacle that the government has turned us into. I repeat, this incapable, inept government. That's what we want for Venezuela, and that's why we're here at the National Electoral Council, and we demand all these conditions.
Falcón, a 56-year-old former state governor, believes he can win by taking advantage of widespread dissatisfaction with the ruling socialists over Venezuela's dire economic crisis that have millions struggling for food and medicines. Maduro's two strongest opposition rivals, among them former presidential candidate Enrique Capriles, are barred from standing. The United States is also considering imposing sanctions against Maduro's government due to what it says are unfair conditions for the presidential vote. For Venezuela, it is another attempt from the U.S. to interfere in the country, and it's vowing to hold the presidential vote in spite of the criticism from abroad. Teresa Bow, Al Jazeera.
Asian stocks fell sharply this morning after U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans to impose steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The plans have spooked investors and members of the president's own Republican Party with fears of a global trade war. Al Jazeera's Kristen Salumi reports.
President Donald Trump announced steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports after this White House meeting, much to the delight of visiting industry representatives, who say they've been hurt by a flood of cheap imports.
They've been very unfairly treated by bad policy, by bad trade deals, by other countries. They've been horribly treated by other countries, and they have not been properly represented. More importantly, because of that, our workers in our country have not been properly represented.
The president promised to impose a 25% tariff on steel and 10% on aluminum.
We're going to bring steel back.
He was making good on a campaign promise to revive U.S. manufacturing and address a trade imbalance with China, a position that saw him win big in so-called Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania, where he promised to bring back jobs. But it's unclear if the tariffs will apply to other trade partners like Canada, from whom the U.S. imports the most steel. Some of Trump's cabinet are said to have fought against the tariffs, the announcement catching his staff off guard.
We're not going to get into any more details until those details are finalized.
And it angered Canada's foreign minister, who said any increase would be unacceptable. Any restrictions would harm workers, the industry, and manufacturers on both sides of the border, she said. The steel and aluminum industry is highly integrated and supports critical North American manufacturing supply chains. And while steel and aluminum makers saw their stocks soar on the announcement, the market overall sunk on fears of a trade war and harm to companies who will be hit by higher prices. The president promised a formal announcement of his plan and presumably more details next week. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera.
Talking Stocks is after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for Talking Stocks. 52 stocks traded today, of which 25 advanced, 16 declined, and 11 traded firm. The main JC index advanced by 725 points to close at 289,850. The junior index declined by 14 points to close at 2,845 points. Over 116 million units traded, valued at more than $1 billion on the Jamaican dollar market. And on the US dollar market, 101,500 units traded, valued at over 21,000 US dollars. Wisynco Group, with over 111 million units changing hands, accounted for 95% of market volume. Siboney Group was second with over 1 million units trading. Elite Diagnostic, with 633,886 units, accounted for less than 1% of the market volume crossing the floor. T-Tech was the top advancer, up 56 cents to close at $6, followed by Carreras, up 94 cents to close at $10.52, and Proven Investments, up $1.95 to close at $27.95. The main decliners were Siboney Group, down a cent to close at 9 cents, followed by Kingston Properties, losing 47 cents to close at $6.18, and Paramount Trading down 20 cents to close at $3.10. In foreign exchange trading, the Jamaican dollar lost ground on the US and British pound today, but gained on the Canadian dollar. The US ended the day selling for $128.40, gaining 41 cents on the Jamaican dollar. The Canadian lost $2.54 to sell for $96.87 against the Jamaican, while the British pound gained $1.62 on the local currency, ending the day at $176.89 on average. And that's the news, but before we go, a recap of our top story. Economic Program Oversight Committee EPOC co-chair Keith Duncan admits that recent growth numbers have been disappointing. Thanks for watching. For more content, please visit our website at batvja.com. I'm Andrew Laidley. Pleasant viewing.